The year was 1996. Deep within the heart of Africa lies a land of breathtaking vistas and ancient rhythms. This is Kilima Valley, Kenya, a place where the sky stretches endlessly, a canvas of azure blue painted with the fleeting strokes of clouds. Here the sun beats down with an intensity that shapes life itself, forging resilience in every blade of grass, every creature that roams its plains. The air itself hums with an unseen energy, a timeless pulse that has beaten for millennia. Kilima Valley, a realm of raw, untamed beauty, where nature's grand theatre plays out its daily dramas, largely untouched by the hurried pace of the human world beyond its horizons, guarding secrets deep within its folds. This valley is a sanctuary, teeming with life in its most vibrant and sometimes most brutal forms. Majestic elephants traverse ancient pathways, their wisdom etched into the lines of their weathered skin. Giraffes, elegant and serene, reach for the highest acacia leaves, their silhouettes stark against the golden sunsets. Predators, sleek and powerful, move with a silent grace, embodying the very essence of the wild. Yet Kilima Valley is not merely a picturesque landscape, it is a crucible. A place where survival is a daily testament to strength and instinct, where the delicate balance between life and death is ever present, a constant reminder of nature's unyielding laws. Here, the unexpected is always just a breath away. It was in this extraordinary setting, amidst the chorus of the wild, that a story began to unfold. A story unlike any other that the valley had witnessed before. It was a narrative not penned by human hands initially, but whispered on the winds that swept across the grasslands, carried in the dust devils that danced under the midday sun. This tale would gently challenge the long-held beliefs about the boundaries between species, the very nature of connection itself. It would speak of courage, not just of the body, but of the heart, and the remarkable capacity for love to bloom in the most arid of places, against all conceivable odds. For Kilima Valley, in that particular year, became the silent observer of an encounter that would ripple outwards far beyond its geographical confines. It bore witness to a bond so profound, so resilient, that it seemed to defy the very edicts of the natural world it governed. This is the introduction to that remarkable chronicle, a testament to an unbreakable thread woven between two souls from entirely different worlds. A story of hope, of enduring spirit, and of a love that time could not erase nor distance diminish. The valley held its breath, waiting for this unique chapter in its long history to commence, a chapter that would forever echo its name. Into this world of primal majesty stepped Thomas Reed, a British wildlife photographer. He was a man whose heart beat in rhythm with the African wilderness, his lens not just a tool of his trade, but an extension of his soul. Thomas was driven by a profound respect for the creatures he documented. His mission to capture their essence, to tell their stories to a world often too disconnected to hear their silent pleas. He had spent years immersed in the untamed corners of the earth, seeking not to conquer, but to understand. In Kilima Valley, he was on assignment, dedicated to a conservation project focusing on the region's magnificent elephant herds, his days spent patiently observing, waiting for those fleeting moments of truth. It was here, amidst his dedicated work, that fate would orchestrate an encounter of a different kind. Not with the giants he was studying, but with a creature far smaller, far more vulnerable. This is also the story of a lion who would come to be known as Barafu. The name, meaning ice in Swahili, would in time prove to be a poignant irony, for the warmth of the bond he would share was anything but cold. Barafu's beginnings were shrouded in the harsh realities of the wild, a tiny spark of life facing overwhelming odds. A whisper against the roar of the savannah, seemingly destined for a swift and silent end, unseen, unheard. The narrative that binds Thomas and Barafu is not merely an account of an animal rescue, though that is where their shared journey began. It transcends the simple tale of a man helping a creature in need. It delves deep into the very essence of connection, an exploration of an interspecies friendship that blossomed against the stark backdrop of survival. Theirs became a story of mutual solace, of unspoken understanding, a companionship that defied conventional wisdom and the unwritten rules of the wild. It was a testament to the idea that empathy knows no bounds, that the capacity for affection can bridge even the widest of divides, forging links stronger than instinct alone. This chronicle, therefore, is one of profound emotional resonance. It is a story, yes, of survival against the odds, a cub pulled from the brink, a man finding purpose. But it is so much more. It is a story of deep, abiding love, a love that would face the pain of separation, the ache of loss. And ultimately it is the story of a reunion, so improbable, so powerful, it would seem to bend the very laws of nature itself. A reunion that speaks to the enduring power of memory, the unbreakable threads of connection, and the lion who waited, holding on to a bond that time could not sever. A testament to a love that simply refused to be forgotten. Thomas Reed moved with a quiet reverence through the Kilima Valley. His days were mapped by the sun's arc, his focus on the great elephant herds. He knew their ancient pathways, their gentle rumbles a familiar soundtrack to his solitary work. The air usually held the scent of dust, wild sage, and the distant presence of animals. He was a man at peace in this vastness, his camera an unobtrusive witness. Each morning began with the cool promise of dawn, the light slowly unveiling the sprawling landscapes. He understood the rhythms of this place, the subtle cues, the silent language of the wild. He was, he believed, merely an observer here. But on this particular day, the familiar symphony of the savannah was pierced. A sound, high-pitched and sharp, cut through the air. It was a cry filled with an unmistakable desperation. Thomas froze. He lowered his camera, his head tilted, listening. This was not the playful yelp of a young baboon, nor the call of a bird he recognized. It was thin, reedy, and utterly forlorn. The sound seemed to carry the weight of an immense aloneness, a tiny pinprick of distress in the vast, indifferent expanse of the African bush. It tugged at something deep within him, an unexpected dissonance in the day's otherwise peaceful progression. He moved cautiously, his boots making little sound on the dry earth. The cry came again, a little weaker this time, guiding him. He pushed through thorny acacia scrub, his eyes scanning the parched ground. The sun beat down, the heat reflecting off the baked soil. What creature could make such a sound of pure, unadulterated need? His mind raced through possibilities, none of them comforting. He was accustomed to the circle of life, its often harsh realities. Yet this sound felt different, more vulnerable than anything he had encountered in a long while. He hoped, yet also dreaded what he might find, and then he saw it. Nestled in the scant shade of a withered bush lay a lion cub. It was impossibly small. Its fur, the colour of the dust, was matted and dull. There was no mother in sight, no pride, just this tiny, isolated creature, a fragile speck of life abandoned or perhaps tragically orphaned in the vast wilderness. The cub was still, its sides barely moving. It was the embodiment of helplessness, a silent testament to the unforgiving nature of the wild. Thomas knelt slowly, his heart constricting at the pitiful sight. The desperate cries had led him to this. Thomas reached out a tentative hand, his fingers gently touching the cub's flank. It was cold, far too cold for the heat of the Kenyan day. The cub's ribs were starkly visible beneath its thin coat of fur. Its eyes were clouded, barely open, and it offered no resistance. Only the faintest whimper escaped its lips. This was a life flickering precariously, on the very brink of being extinguished. Every sign pointed to a creature in its final, fading moments. Malnourished, dehydrated and alone, its chances of surviving another hour, let alone a day, seemed impossibly slim. The silence that now enveloped it was more alarming than its earlier cries. He knew the unwritten law of the wilderness: observe, but do not interfere. Nature's course, however brutal, must be allowed to unfold. He had built his career on this principle, respecting the delicate, often harsh balance that governed this untamed world. To intervene was to play God, to disrupt a natural selection process that had shaped these lands for millennia. He had witnessed countless scenes of life and death, documenting them with a photographer's steady hand and an understanding of this primal order. He had always believed that this detachment was a form of respect, a recognition of a power far greater than his own. Yet looking down at the tiny, shivering form, the rules felt distant, academic. The cub was so utterly defenseless. Its faint, shallow breaths were a fragile claim on existence. A profound conflict welled within him. His mind, trained in the ethics of wildlife observation, urged caution, non-intervention. But his heart, the human heart, felt an overwhelming surge of compassion. This was not an abstract concept of nature's way. This was a living being, suffering, dying before his very eyes. The instinct to protect, to nurture, was a powerful countercurrent to years of ingrained professional discipline. He saw not just a species, but an individual. In that moment, Thomas Reed made a choice. He gently, carefully scooped up the tiny lion cub. Its weight was almost negligible in his strong hands. The rules of the wild, the photographer's code, receded. What remained was a simple, undeniable imperative to help. He knew the path he was choosing was uncertain, fraught with challenges. But to walk away, to leave this small life to its fate, was a betrayal of something fundamental within him. He tucked the cub inside his shirt, hoping his body heat might offer some comfort, some spark against the cold that gripped it. The decision was made. He would try. Whispers in the dark, the fight for life. Back at his modest camp, Thomas transformed into a devoted nurse. The small canvas tent became an intensive care unit for one tiny lion cub. He named him Barafu, ice in Swahili, a reminder of the chilling touch of near death from which he had been plucked. The irony was not lost on Thomas, for all he now felt was a desperate warmth, a burning need to shield this fragile flame from the encroaching darkness. He meticulously cleaned the cub, his large hands surprisingly gentle, his voice a low murmur of reassurance. The first few hours were critical, a terrifying tightrope walk between despair and a flickering, almost audacious hope. The nights were the longest. Thomas barely slept. Every 4 hours he would carefully prepare a special formula, feeding Barafu with a small syringe. The cub was initially too weak to suckle properly, each drop a tiny victory. He nestled Barafu in a makeshift incubator, a blanket-lined crate, kept warm with hot water bottles wrapped in towels. He would often reach in just to feel for the reassuring rise and fall of the cub's chest. The silence of the African night outside was punctuated by the soft sounds within the tent. Barafu's faint breaths, Thomas's whispered words of encouragement, stories of distant lands and gentle streams. He massaged Barafu's tiny, frail limbs, trying to stimulate circulation, to coax life back into them. The cub was so small, fitting easily into the palms of his hands. Thomas spoke to him constantly, not caring if the words were understood. He spoke of the sunrise over Kilima Valley, of the strength of the elephants, of the resilience of life itself. He willed his own strength, his own hope, into the tiny creature. There were moments of profound doubt when Barafu seemed to slip further away, his breathing shallow, his body limp. But Thomas would redouble his efforts, his resolve hardening with each passing hour. Slowly, painstakingly, a change began, a subtle shift. Barafu's breathing grew a little stronger, his tiny mouth began to respond more eagerly to the syringe. A faint spark returned to his clouded eyes. Thomas felt a surge of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees. The danger was far from over, but the immediate crisis seemed to be receding, like a dark tide pulling back from the shore. Barafu was fighting, and Thomas was fighting right alongside him, a silent, devoted guardian in the heart of the wild, bound by a promise whispered in the dark. Tentative pause, trusting eyes, a new dawn. As days turned into weeks, Barafu's hold on life grew stronger. Thomas's routine of feeding, cleaning and warmth was met with increasing responsiveness. Barafu's fur gained a healthier sheen, his eyes cleared and alertness flickered within them. He was no longer just a passive recipient of care. He was an active participant in his recovery. The feedings became more interactive. Barafu would nuzzle against Thomas's hand, licking at the formula. He started to make small, contented noises, almost like purrs. Thomas found himself smiling more, the lines of worry around his eyes softening. Barafu tried to take his first wobbly steps, each small milestone a monumental triumph. A new rhythm settled over the camp. Early mornings were for Barafu's first feed, often accompanied by the distant calls of awakening birds. During the warmer parts of the day, Thomas would let Barafu feel the gentle sunlight on his fur. The cub began to explore his surroundings with cautious curiosity. Thomas's presence was a constant, a reassuring anchor in Barafu's expanding world. The bond between them solidified with every shared moment. Trust blossomed in Barafu's eyes. He recognized Thomas's voice, his ears perking up whenever Thomas spoke. The initial fear and fragility were replaced by a sense of security. Echoes of laughter, shadows of play, a bond unbreakable. With each passing week, Barafu's strength surged. The once frail cub was now a bundle of boundless energy and playful mischief. His legs grew sturdier, his movements more coordinated. He began to exhibit the natural instincts of a young predator, pouncing on Thomas's boots and stalking insects. The quiet tent was now filled with the sounds of their interactions, Barafu's soft growls and Thomas's gentle laughter. Their days developed a joyful routine. Thomas would take breaks from his work to engage with Barafu. They would play games of chase around the small clearing outside the tent. Barafu, with his oversized paws and boundless enthusiasm, would tumble and roll, then spring up to launch another mock attack. Thomas, careful of the cub's developing strength, would playfully wrestle back. These moments were precious, forging an unbreakable connection. Barafu learned to recognize Thomas's footsteps and scent. He would greet Thomas with an eager chirp and a rub against his legs. He followed Thomas around the campsite like a devoted shadow. They would sit together as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas speaking softly, Barafu curled contentedly at his side. The bond they shared was extraordinary, a testament to the resilience of life and the capacity for love to transcend species. Barafu was no longer just a rescued animal, he was family. The passage of time in the Kilima Valley flows like a hidden river, sometimes gentle, sometimes swift. For Thomas and Barafu, the months melted into years with an almost dreamlike quality. The tiny, fragile cub was now a magnificent young lion. By the age of 3, Barafu stood tall and proud, his body a testament to the resilience of life. His once oversized paws now carried him with a silent, deliberate grace. A youthful mane had begun to sprout around his noble head. He was the embodiment of wild Africa, breathtaking in his strength and beauty. Barafu's playful antics now held a different undertone. The games of chase and pounce with Thomas became rehearsals for a life he was destined to lead. His movements were sharper, his mock attacks carrying surprising force. The instincts of a predator were awakening with undeniable clarity. He would watch birds in flight with intense focus, his body tensing. The rustle of leaves would draw his immediate attention. He was learning the language of the wild. Their bond remained, a deep current beneath the surface of these changes. Barafu still sought out Thomas's presence, rubbing his massive head against Thomas's legs. He would lie near Thomas in the quiet evenings, a comforting weight. Yet there was a subtle shift in his gaze. His amber eyes increasingly turned towards the vast open plains. A restlessness stirred within him, a yearning for something more. As Barafu matured, his burgeoning strength and wild instincts presented undeniable challenges. The camp was becoming too small for a creature of his power and spirit. He was a lion, not a companion animal, and his primal nature was asserting itself more each day. The local sanctuary team visited and observed Barafu. Their assessment was gentle but firm. Barafu needed more than Thomas could provide within the camp's confines. He needed the freedom to be a lion among lions. For Thomas, this confirmed his deepest fears and his most selfless hopes. The thought of parting with Barafu was a physical pain. This lion was not just an animal he had rescued, he was family. They had shared so much, the quiet dawns, the playful afternoons, the silent companionship under starlit skies. Yet the love he felt for Barafu demanded that he consider what was truly best for the lion. To keep Barafu tethered to him would be an act of selfishness. The sanctuary proposed a rewilding program. It offered a gradual reintroduction to a larger natural habitat. Barafu would learn to hunt, navigate social structures, and live the life nature intended. It was a chance for Barafu to embrace his destiny. With a heavy heart, Thomas made the decision. He would let Barafu go. The preparations began, each step a painful reminder of the approaching separation. Thomas cherished every remaining moment, knowing that soon the space beside him would be empty. The final days before Barafu's departure were filled with a quiet, pervasive sadness. The usual sounds of playful interaction were subdued, replaced by long periods of silent companionship. Thomas spent every possible moment with Barafu, committing every detail to memory. He would run his hands through Barafu's coarse mane, feeling the power and vitality of the animal he had nurtured. The African air itself seemed to hold its breath, aware of the impending farewell. On their last night together, Thomas led Barafu to a familiar spot beneath a sprawling acacia tree. He sat beside the young lion, just as they had done countless times before. But this night was different. This night was a goodbye. Thomas spoke softly to Barafu, his voice thick with emotion. He recounted their journey together, from the desperate cry in the dust to this moment of bittersweet parting. "You were so small," he whispered, "and you fought so hard. You saved me too, Barafu. You truly did." He poured out his heart to the lion, sharing his love and hopes for Barafu's future. The morning arrived too soon, cloaked in the cool pre-dawn light. With it came the sanctuary vehicle, a stark reminder of the day's purpose. Leading Barafu towards the transport crate was one of the most difficult things he had ever done. There was a final moment, a long, lingering look between them. Thomas knelt, pressing his forehead against Barafu's, a silent communion of shared memories and unspoken love. Thomas Reed returned to the United Kingdom. The vibrant colours of Kilima Valley faded into the muted greys and greens of the English landscape. Life resumed its familiar patterns, its predictable rhythms. He picked up his camera once more, his assignments taking him to different corners of the world. His work was celebrated. His photographs hung in galleries, his name spoken with respect in professional circles. He achieved the success many strive for. Yet beneath the surface of this outward accomplishment, a profound change had taken root within him. The bustling cities and orderly countryside felt strangely subdued. The sounds were different here. The roar of traffic replaced the roar of a lion. The chirping of garden birds seemed a faint echo of the African bush. He found himself listening for sounds that were no longer there. The phantom weight of a young lion leaning against his leg, the soft padding of paws on dusty earth. These sensations, once so real, now existed only in the quiet chambers of his memory. His flat, once a comfortable sanctuary, now felt quiet. The absence of Barafu was a palpable presence. He immersed himself in his work, perhaps seeking a distraction. His photographs from this period were often praised for their depth, their poignant beauty. Years passed. Thomas continued his life, his career flourishing. Yet a quiet decision he'd made upon his return from Kenya remained steadfast. He never raised another animal. Friends and colleagues sometimes suggested a dog or even a cat to fill the silence of his home. They meant well, of course. They saw a man living alone, a man who had once shown such extraordinary capacity for nurture. But Thomas would always politely decline. His heart, it seemed, had made a silent vow, an unspoken commitment to a memory too precious to dilute, too sacred to attempt to replicate. For Thomas, the bond he had shared with Barafu was singular, a phenomenon that could not be repeated. It was a connection forged in the crucible of survival, nurtured against all odds and steeped in the magic of the African wilderness. To try and find that again in another creature would feel like a betrayal, a diminishing of what had been so uniquely powerful. Barafu was not just an animal he had cared for. He was an integral part of Thomas's own story, a piece of his heart that now roamed free under a distant sky. No other creature could fill the space Barafu had occupied. Barafu became a cherished memory, almost a dream that felt too beautiful, too intense to have truly been real. Thomas would often find himself lost in thought, replaying scenes from their time together. The first tentative steps, the playful pounces, the quiet companionship under the stars. He kept a small worn photograph of Barafu as a cub tucked away, a private treasure. Sometimes late at night, he would take it out, his fingers tracing the outline of the tiny lion, the ache of longing still fresh, yet softened by the warmth of remembrance. The passage of time did not dim the vibrancy of these recollections. The world moved on, seasons changed, but the space Barafu had left in Thomas's life remained. It wasn't an empty void of despair, but rather a quiet garden of memory, tended with care and affection. He understood that some bonds are so profound they transcend physical presence. The love he felt for Barafu was one such bond. It lived on, a silent testament to an extraordinary friendship. This unfulfilled longing was not a source of bitterness, but a gentle reminder of a time when his life had been touched by something truly wild, truly magical, and undeniably real. Though miles and years separated them, Thomas often felt an unseen thread connecting him to Barafu. He would look up at the moon, wondering if Barafu was looking at the same celestial sphere, a wild king under the African night. There was a quiet, persistent hope within him that Barafu was thriving, that he had found his place, that he was living the life he was destined for. This hope was a small, warm ember in his heart, a comfort in moments of quiet reflection. He imagined Barafu strong and free, his roar echoing across the savannah, a symbol of untamed spirit. This unfulfilled longing, this enduring connection subtly shaped Thomas's perspective. His photography, while always respectful of nature, took on an even deeper reverence for the wild and its inhabitants. He became a more vocal advocate for conservation, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had experienced firsthand the profound intelligence and emotional capacity of creatures often misunderstood. He understood the fragility of their existence, the importance of protecting the spaces where such wildness could flourish, where other Barafus might live and roam free, untouched by undue human interference. He never spoke openly about the depth of his feelings for Barafu, not in detail. It was a private sorrow, a private joy. How could he explain to others the feeling of a lion's head resting in his lap, the trust in those amber eyes? It was a language understood by the heart, not easily translated into words. Yet those who knew him well sensed a quiet depth, a gentle melancholy that coexisted with his strength and resilience. They saw a man who carried something precious within him, something that had changed him in fundamental ways, enriching his spirit even as it left a trace of sadness. The years continued to unspool, each one adding to the distance between that farewell in Kilima Valley and his present life. Thomas grew older. The world changed around him, but the memory of Barafu and the love forged in that unique companionship remained a constant. It was an anchor, a reminder of a profound truth he had learned, that love knows no boundaries of species, and that some bonds, once formed, endure beyond separation, beyond time. His heart held fast to that truth, a steadfast beacon in the quiet landscape of his later years, waiting, though he knew not for what. 14 years. A significant passage of time in any life, human or animal. 14 years had flowed like a vast, silent river since Thomas Reed had last seen Barafu. It was now 2013. Thomas was older, his hair streaked with more grey, his steps perhaps a little slower, but his heart still held the quiet ache and the cherished memories of the lion he had raised. Barafu, he assumed, was either a fading legend in the Kilima Valley, or more likely his life force had long since returned to the great cycle of nature. The raw pain of separation had softened over time, evolving into a gentle, nostalgic melancholy, a private testament to a bond that felt almost otherworldly in its intensity and its abrupt ending. A chapter he believed was irrevocably closed. Then, on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday morning, an airmail envelope arrived. It was thin, bearing unfamiliar stamps from Kenya. Thomas turned it over in his hands, a flicker of surprise, perhaps a faint, almost unidentifiable premonition stirring within him. He received little mail from Africa these days. His direct contacts with the sanctuary had dwindled over the years, fading into polite, infrequent exchanges. He slit the envelope open with a careful hand. His curiosity piqued. Inside, a single sheet of paper typed, bearing the letterhead of the Kilima Valley Wildlife Sanctuary. He began to read, his brow furrowing slightly, expecting perhaps an update on conservation efforts or a general newsletter. The words on the page seemed to leap out at him, blurring for a moment before snapping into sharp, unbelievable focus. Barafu. Alive. His breath caught in his throat. He read the sentence again and then a third time, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs with a force that startled him. It couldn't be. After all this time, it felt like a dream, a trick of his own longing mind. He gripped the letter tighter, his knuckles white. The world around him, The quiet hum of his English home seemed to recede, replaced by the distant, vibrant pulse of the African continent, a pulse he thought he had long since left behind. The letter continued, providing more details, each one a fresh wave of astonishment. Barafoo was not only alive, but he had thrived beyond anyone's wildest expectations. He was now the dominant male of a large, successful pride, a true king of his domain. He was scarred, majestic, a wild lion in every sense, a testament to his strength and resilience. Thomas sank into his chair, the letter trembling in his hand. A flood of emotions washed over him. Disbelief, joy so profound it was almost painful, and a sudden, overwhelming sense of wonder at the tenacity of life and the enduring power of a bond he had thought was lost to time itself. But it was the next part of the letter that truly seized Thomas's soul, sending a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the cool English air. The sanctuary staff, the letter explained, had been observing some unusual behavior in Barafoo. He was a wild lion, fully integrated, yet there was something distinct. During routine monitoring, they had occasionally played audio recordings, testing pride responses, and when, on a whim, they had played an old recording of Thomas's voice, captured years ago during his time at the camp, Barafoo's reaction had been immediate, unmistakable. He had stopped, he had listened, his great head had risen, his ears swiveling, searching. He had looked around, a deep, guttural sound rumbling in his chest. He stood up. He waited. Thomas read these lines over and over, the words imprinting themselves onto his very being. Waited. The lion remembered. After 14 years, separated by continents, by species, by the vastness of the wild, Barafoo remembered his voice. The implications were staggering, defying all logical expectation, all scientific understanding of animal memory and attachment over such a prolonged period of separation. It wasn't just a flicker of recognition, it was a response, an active seeking. The bond, it seemed, had not been severed by time or distance. It had endured, a silent, invisible thread stretching across the years, held fast in the heart of a wild lion. A profound warmth spread through Thomas, a feeling of connection so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. There was no hesitation in Thomas's mind, no need for lengthy deliberation. The decision was instantaneous, a primal urge, a calling he could not ignore. He had to go back, he had to see Barafoo. The years seemed to fall away from him. The weariness he sometimes felt, the quiet resignation of his later years, was replaced by a sudden surge of energy, a vibrant, almost youthful sense of purpose. The thought of seeing Barafoo again, of looking into those amber eyes, of perhaps witnessing that recognition firsthand, was an irresistible force. It was more than just curiosity, it was a deep, resonant need to answer that waiting, to close a circle left open for far too long. Within hours, Thomas was making arrangements. A flight to Kenya, a call to the sanctuary to confirm his arrival. He moved with a renewed vigor, his actions decisive. The news had reignited a flame within him, a spark of hope and anticipation that had long lain dormant. The memories of Barafoo, once tinged with the sadness of loss, now shimmered with the possibility of reunion. The journey ahead would be long, perhaps emotionally arduous, but the pull towards Kilima Valley, towards the lion who waited, was the strongest force in his life once more. The past was rushing forward to meet him, and Thomas Reed was ready to embrace it. Thomas flew back to Kenya. The journey felt both impossibly long and incredibly short. Each mile brought him closer to a past he thought was forever lost. He was older now. His hands, which had once steadied a tiny, shivering cub, now shook with anticipation. He arrived at the sanctuary, the air thick with familiar scents, the sounds of the bush a welcoming symphony. Rangers led him to the plateau, a place overlooking the vast plains Barafu now called home. Then one of them pointed. "That's him," they whispered. A magnificent lion lay beneath an acacia tree, a portrait of wild majesty. Barafu was immense, far larger than Thomas had ever imagined he would become. His mane was a glorious dark halo around his powerful head. Scars, faint lines across his muzzle and flanks, told tales of battles fought and won. He was the undisputed king of this domain, exuding an aura of serene authority. He lay with a regal stillness, seemingly unaware of the human observers. Thomas's heart swelled. This was Barafu, the cub he had nursed, the friend he had loved, transformed into this breathtaking creature. He was a wild lion through and through, yet a thread of connection pulsed between them, unseen but deeply felt. Thomas stepped forward, his throat tight. He uttered a single word, a name carried on the gentle breeze: Barafu. The sound was quiet, almost tentative, yet it cut through the stillness. The massive lion's ears twitched, alert. His great head rose, slowly, deliberately. Golden eyes, ancient and knowing, scanned the distance. They found Thomas. For a long moment the lion simply stared, his gaze intense, unblinking. Thomas stood his ground, his own gaze locked with Barafu's, a silent question hanging in the air between them. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then Barafu stood, not with a sudden movement, but with a measured grace. He took a step, and then another. He did not run. He walked directly towards the man who had raised him so many years ago. The rangers watched in stunned silence. Thomas felt tears welling in his eyes. Barafu reached him. He did not roar nor show any aggression. Instead, he gently, powerfully pressed his massive head into Thomas's chest. A deep rumbling purr like distant thunder vibrated through Thomas, an echo of a love that had never faded. For what seemed like an eternity, they remained like that, man and lion reunited against all odds. Hours passed as they sat together on the sun-warmed earth. Barafu curled near Thomas, a giant comforting presence. Thomas spoke softly, whispering memories of their shared past, of playful days and quiet nights. He spoke of the cub, of the bond, of the heartache of their parting. The lion listened, his eyes occasionally blinking, his body relaxed, trusting. There were no grand gestures needed, no complex explanations required for this extraordinary communion. It was a language of the heart, spoken and understood across the chasm of species. Their connection was a profound mystery, a love that had endured the years of separation. It had defied the vast distances, the different worlds they inhabited. It had overcome the boundaries between man and beast, a testament to something primal and deeply true. Science might struggle to explain it, logic might find it improbable. But for Thomas and for Barafu, it was simply real. This quiet moment on the Kenyan plateau was a powerful affirmation of an unbreakable bond. A love that time could not diminish, nor the wild fully reclaim. It was a sacred reunion witnessed only by the ancient landscape. Eventually the time came for them to part once more. Barafu, with a final soft rub against Thomas, rose and slowly walked back towards the distant trees where his pride awaited. He was a king returning to his kingdom. Thomas watched him go, a sense of peace settling over him, a warmth that soothed the old ache of loss. He too would return to his home, to his life. But something fundamental had shifted within him. The circle felt complete. The unspoken question that had lingered for 14 years had been answered in the most beautiful and affirming way imaginable. Barafu returned to his wild existence. Thomas returned to his world. Yet the encounter left an indelible mark on both their lives, a story whispered on the African winds. In the vast, untamed heart of Kilima Valley, a lion remembered the man who had once offered him salvation, the man who had shown him love. And Thomas Reed carried with him the undeniable truth that such a bond once forged never truly breaks. It echoes in eternity, a heartwarming tale of a lion who waited and a love that never ever forgot.